Joan sits frozen on her couch, her pupils flickering as the television plays a scene from her own life, acted out, frame for frame, by Salma Hayek. A wedding descends into chaos. Joan, dressed in a cheerleader outfit, defecates in the middle of the aisle as horrified guests look on. The camera captures every second. Deep inside Streamberry headquarters, a quantum computer glows with cold blue light. A technician shrugs and says, "She's just one of millions of shows." This may be the least Black Mirror-like episode of the series, and yet it's the one that hits closest to home. There's no dystopian war, no cybernetic implants, no humans scavenging a post-apocalyptic world. Just a user agreement we all click without reading, an AI contract we assume is a joke, and a world far more plausible and terrifying than we'd care to admit. Your life might already be a live show, and you're the last one to know. While some viewers dismiss this episode as a surreal comedy outlier, it's actually a digital horror story wrapped in glossy satire. It skewers more than just AI and deepfake culture or the ethics of data mining. It challenges something even more primal: what happens when algorithms understand you better than you understand yourself and begin rewriting your story without your consent. Joan isn't a criminal, a liar, or a particularly interesting person. She's just a mid-level manager trying to keep her life together. One night, she opens up Streamberry, the show's clear stand-in for Netflix, with her fiancé, only to see a brand new series titled Joan Is Awful. What unfolds on screen is a near-perfect replica of her day. Her therapy session, the awkward conversation with her ex, even the private thoughts she never dared say aloud. And the one playing her? Salma Hayek. With each new episode, Joan's life collapses in real time. Her engagement, her career, her reputation. And slowly, she realizes this isn't just about likeness rights. It's something far more existential, a layered, orchestrated simulation where her rebellion is just another plotline in someone else's bingeable drama. In the rest of this analysis, we'll dissect the four nested realities built into this story, explore its hidden critique of AI-driven entertainment, break down the legal trap of modern user agreements, examine the gender politics behind media avatars, and unpack how this episode warns us about something we barely notice anymore: the quiet erasure of personal authorship in the age of constant surveillance. But first, a more disturbing question: who exactly is this show for? And what if it's not fiction at all? Before you can understand how Joan Is Awful pulls off its dizzying layers of reality, you have to look at who built it. Charlie Brooker, the show's creator, isn't new to asking terrifying questions about technology, but this time, the blade is pointed at the very platform airing the episode. Streamberry, the fictional streaming service, is a near clone of Netflix. And Netflix is, of course, the very real distributor of Black Mirror. Brooker didn't just parody his distributor, he turned the mirror around and cracked it right down the middle. Brooker conceived the episode at a moment when AI content generation had just hit the cultural mainstream. ChatGPT was exploding. Deepfakes were no longer science fiction. The Hollywood writers' strike, driven partly by fears over AI replacing human creatives, loomed on the horizon. Joan Is Awful wasn't designed to speculate about the future. It was meant to scream about the present, while using the exact tools it warns us about. Early drafts of the script were reportedly darker. Joan wasn't funny, she was broken. The show within the show wasn't glossy and ironic, it was voyeuristic and cruel. But as production took shape, Brooker and director Ali Pankiv shifted gears. They wanted satire, not just despair. That's when the meta-comedy began to take over. Salma Hayek wasn't originally cast. Her addition was part of a late rewrite that emphasized the absurdity of celebrity image licensing. The decision to have Hayek play herself, watching herself defecate on screen, then suing herself, gave the episode its absurdist spark and deepened its meta-commentary on how actors are losing control over their digital selves. Another twist: Annie Murphy, best known for Schitt's Creek, was chosen precisely because of her likability. The audience needed to sympathize with Joan quickly, even when she made ambiguous choices. Murphy's performance threads that needle. She's bewildered, bitter, resigned, but never melodramatic. She grounds a premise that could easily spin out into parody. Even the tech behind the show, Streamberry's Quamputer, a quantum computer that generates infinite layers of simulated realities, was drawn from real-world AI architecture. The design team consulted with futurists and machine learning specialists to construct a plausible logic for how a platform might scale personalized entertainment by recursively embedding characters within simulations, then using user data to steer the drama in real time. Several scenes nearly didn't make it. The wedding sabotage sequence was almost cut for being too ridiculous until Brooker reportedly insisted it stay, because that was the point. The more insane the system gets, he argued, the more it rewards outrage. The final shot, where the aspect ratio shifts from cinematic 2.00 to 1 to TV standard 16:9 as Joan reclaims her life, was added late in editing. It's subtle but symbolic. Reality has flattened again, but you're still being watched. Always. And here's the part no one saw coming. Buried in the actual Netflix terms of service, there really is language granting the company sweeping rights to user data, including biometric and behavioral information. It's legal boilerplate. It's not a simulation. And it's already live. Joan Is Awful opens like a rom-com, but frames like a surveillance tape. And that's the point. The color palette tells on itself. Joan's real life is filmed in flat, desaturated tones, washed-out blues, dusty grays, the dull beige of overlit office cubicles. It's the palette of life under fluorescent lighting, the visual shorthand for a life not lived, just tolerated. But the show within the show, the AI-produced Joan Is Awful, is slick, cinematic, and hypersaturated. Salma Hayek's version of Joan lives in neon-lit drama and tabloid-level contrast. This isn't just an aesthetic choice. It's a visual indictment. Joan's actual life is so aesthetically unremarkable that it needs to be upgraded for entertainment. And then there's the framing. The real Joan is constantly shot in mid-wides and isolating angles, boxed in by door frames, office windows, and the ever-present TV screen in her apartment. She's literally trapped in frames, framed in every sense of the word. Meanwhile, the AI Joan Hayek is shot like a prestige antihero, center-framed, walking in slow motion, always in control of the lens. It's not her story, it's the algorithm's fantasy of who she should be. A subtle but crucial scene unfolds in the therapist's office. Joan opens up about feeling like a fraud, like she's not actually living her own life. The therapist listens, but in hindsight, this moment isn't therapy. It's extraction. That session, like the rest of her day, becomes fodder for entertainment. And this sets the philosophical tone. When your most vulnerable confessions can be commodified, is there any private self left? Let's talk about Salma Hayek's character, because she's not just stunt casting. She's a walking paradox. Her on-screen presence as Joan is hyperfeminine, sexualized, and algorithmically flawless, designed to draw eyeballs and engagement. But when the real Salma discovers what her image has been forced to perform, her response is furious. She realizes she's become an avatar of humiliation. In doing so, she becomes the voice for a very 21st century crisis, the celebrity who signed away her digital rights and now watches herself commit acts she never imagined. This is where the gender politics of the episode sharpen. The commodification of female bodies, voices, and reputations isn't just collateral damage, it's a business model. The fact that Joan's most degrading scene, the infamous wedding moment, becomes the series' most watched episode mirrors how outrage, scandal, and bodily spectacle are rewarded by platform algorithms. Whether it's Joan or Hayek, their humiliation isn't a glitch, it's a feature. Even supporting characters reinforce the theme of extraction. Krish, Joan's boyfriend, doesn't react to her betrayal with empathy. He reacts as a viewer. His trust is based on what the algorithm showed him, not on lived experience. In this world, everyone is primed to consume each other's lives, not understand them. It's social media logic, made literal. And then there's Bep, the deadpan engineer played by Michael Cera. He serves as the most disturbing figure in the episode, the banality of evil wrapped in a hoodie. He isn't malicious. He's just detached. To him, infinite simulations of people's lives are just system outputs. The fact that Joan is suffering? That's not my department. His apathy isn't just chilling, it's the real horror. Even set design plays into the narrative layers. Joan's apartment and the Streamberry server room mirror each other in layout. Both are cold, minimal, rectangular boxes. One is her home. One is her prison. But visually, there's no difference. That's not a production oversight. It's a thematic warning. When your personal life and data life are built from the same template, escape isn't spatial, it's existential. By the time Joan picks up the axe to smash the quantum computer, the moment feels earned not just as rebellion, but as reclaiming authorship. She's not just destroying a machine. She's shattering the lens that made her a character. But even that act, as we'll soon see, may not be her own choice either. The narrative structure of Joan Is Awful doesn't just tell a story, it folds it. Then it folds the fold. Then it questions whether there ever was a page to begin with. At first glance, this is a familiar Black Mirror formula: ordinary person plus invasive tech plus moral crisis. But the moment Joan realizes she's not the original, just a simulation of a simulation, the structure implodes. What we thought was the real world is revealed to be just another scripted layer. And that's the episode's most daring move. It doesn't just break the fourth wall, it burns it down and reveals a wall behind that, and another behind that. This is not linear storytelling. It's recursive storytelling, where each revelation doesn't resolve tension, but refracts it. Brooker engineers the episode like a simulation nested inside a simulation, forcing the audience into the same epistemological freefall as Joan. The deeper she digs for truth, the more she discovers that her agency might itself be artificial. Her rebellion might be code. Her choices choreography. Compare this to earlier Black Mirror episodes. White Christmas also dealt with digital copies of consciousness, but kept the narrative mostly in a 3-act shell. USS Callister flirted with simulation layers but resolved its power fantasy with a hero's arc. Joan Is Awful refuses resolution. Even after the computer is destroyed, even when Joan regains control, we're left with an unspoken dread. What if this new reality is also scripted? The structural effect is not just disorientation, it's existential erosion. As viewers, we begin to doubt not just what we're watching, but why we're watching. Are we complicit in Joan's suffering? Is our desire for meta-commentary part of the machine's entertainment loop? This is where critical discourse splits. Some critics, like The Guardian, hail the episode as a return to Black Mirror's roots: paranoid, socially urgent, and self-aware. They applaud its metatextual brilliance, a Netflix show that parodies Netflix, using Netflix aesthetics to critique algorithm-driven entertainment, while also being a form of that entertainment. Others argue it collapses under its own cleverness. Vulture called it conceptually bold, but emotionally empty, criticizing the flattening of character arcs in favor of structural gimmickry. To them, Joan never really changes. She reacts, but doesn't evolve. Her trauma becomes a metaphor, not a journey. Then there's the academic take. Some media theorists interpret the episode through the lens of Baudrillard's simulacra theory, in which simulations replace reality and eventually become more real than real. Joan Is Awful, in this reading, is a case study in hyperreality. Joan doesn't reclaim her identity. She enters a new simulation where the illusion of choice replaces choice itself. The algorithm doesn't kill you. It absorbs you, stylizes you, and markets you back to yourself. But perhaps the most chilling interpretation came not from scholars, but from actors themselves. During the 2023 Screen Actors Guild strike, Joan Is Awful was repeatedly cited as a prophecy already coming true. The threat of AI-generated performances, deep-faked celebrity avatars, and studio-owned likenesses wasn't speculative. It was actively being negotiated at the bargaining table. For many, the episode blurred the line not between fiction and reality, but between genre and documentary. The choice to include Salma Hayek and Cate Blanchett as characters within simulations, without giving them narrative closure, reinforces this ambiguity. They're world-famous, but powerless. Legendary, yet reduced to content packs. The question the episode leaves hanging isn't what happened to Joan, but when will it happen to us? Because if the show can deep-fake Hayek today, why not you tomorrow? To understand what's really being attacked in Joan Is Awful, you have to stop thinking of Joan as a character and start seeing her as infrastructure. She isn't just one woman whose life is hijacked. She represents the commodified self in a system where identity, experience, and emotion have all become data points. Her existence is no longer lived. It's processed, formatted, and uploaded. She is the product and the platform. She's what happens when the personal becomes public property. The real engine behind this episode isn't the quantum computer. It's the ecosystem around it, the corporations that build opaque platforms, the legal structures that hide exploitation inside 80-page user agreements, the audience that hungers for self-reflection but refuses to take responsibility for the mirror's damage. This is a story about systems disguised as stories. At its core lies a brutal contradiction. Joan is both powerless and blameworthy. She doesn't choose to be surveilled, but she did click, "I agree." She didn't create the show, but the show only works because her life is just familiar enough to generate mass appeal. In a Kafkaesque twist, her suffering becomes her fault because she allowed herself to be ordinary, predictable, marketable, algorithmically efficient. And that's the hidden terror. In a content economy, mediocrity isn't safe. It's profitable. Brooker uses this paradox to expose a larger social trap. In the age of platforms, the individual must now be both brand and consumer, performer and product. You curate your own feed, optimize your own persona, manage your own audience. The platforms merely provide the stage. And if you falter, if your story becomes too boring, they'll write a better one for you. Without asking. This ties into the episode's most overlooked character, Mona Javadi, the CEO of Streamberry. She doesn't appear until late in the story, but she is its architect. Her logic is cold, efficient, and familiar. People love watching themselves, she says, even if it's awful. She represents a class of technocrats who no longer differentiate between content and citizens. Her systems don't need to punish you, they simply monetize your collapse. When Joan and Salma confront her, there's no moral outrage, no denial. Only operational indifference. For Mona, this isn't a horror story, it's a business model. Your humiliation is scalable. Your outrage, recyclable. Your rebellion, pre-monetized. That's where the script takes its boldest turn. Joan's final decision to destroy the computer isn't framed as triumph. It's framed as recursion. She swings the axe, yes, but every frame of that rebellion is still watched, still recorded, still formatted into another show. Her liberation is content, too. So the real question isn't whether Joan escapes. It's whether escape is even structurally possible. The episode quietly suggests it isn't. Every layer of reality that Joan breaks through reveals another one above it. Even the closing moment, in a quaint coffee shop, Joan at peace, is filmed like a sitcom finale. The camera lingers too long. The lighting is too warm. The framing too perfect. It feels staged because it is. The simulation hasn't ended. It's just changed tone. That's the most devastating revelation of all. The ultimate fantasy isn't fame or immortality. It's authenticity. And even that has been turned into a genre. When Joan Is Awful dropped, it wasn't just dissected by critics. It hit a cultural nerve. Viewers didn't just watch the episode. They recognized themselves in it. Not as Joan necessarily, but as people who had at some point clicked agree without reading. As users who uploaded selfies to apps, let their smart devices listen in, or allowed recommendation algorithms to shape what they consume. In Joan's fate, they saw their own passive complicity. That's where the episode's social impact cuts deep. It's not accusing tech of betrayal. It's accusing us of surrender. The groups most affected by this story are the ones already embedded in algorithmic exposure. Gig workers monitored by performance metrics, influencers optimized for engagement, actors with contracts that license their faces to CGI replicas. For them, Joan Is Awful isn't speculative fiction. It's a stylized echo of real precarity. And yet, the public reaction was paradoxical. On one hand, the episode was lauded as a prescient satire of AI-driven entertainment, with many calling it Black Mirror's comeback. On the other, it sparked memes, TikTok filters, and reaction videos, the very same kinds of secondary content ecosystems it critiques. It became the next binge watch, the next spectacle. This irony isn't incidental. It's the show's post-credits punchline. The simulation feeds on critique. The algorithm doesn't just digest rebellion, it thrives on it. A story like Joan Is Awful performs two functions at once. It warns you, then distracts you from the warning by being entertaining. So who in this cycle holds real power? Streamberry's CEO, Mona Javadi, makes it seem like she does. But even she is a puppet, enforcing terms crafted by legal departments, justified by user metrics, rewarded by shareholder reports. The true power lies in abstraction, systems so large, impersonal, and self-reinforcing that no individual can meaningfully disrupt them. Not even their architects. That's why the show doesn't offer a cathartic villain death or a public reckoning. The only thing Joan gets to destroy is a machine. And even then, it's just one of many. She gets no closure because the system she's fighting isn't a person, it's a logic. This brings us to the ethical rupture at the episode's core. What happens when consent is legally granted but ethically meaningless? Joan clicked agree. So did Hayek. So have all of us. But those agreements are designed for legal cover, not moral clarity. They exist to protect institutions from us, not to protect us from them. That's the ethical sleight of hand. You were never actually asked for permission. You were shown a checkbox and told that your convenience depended on it. The show also complicates our understanding of justice. Joan loses her relationship, job, and sanity, but not because of something she did. Rather, because of how others interpret her simulated self. That distinction between what you are and how you're rendered has collapsed. In this world, perception is punishment. By the time she finally acts to destroy the system, Joan isn't seeking justice. She's trying to reclaim authorship. But in a hypermediated world, even authorship is unstable. The moment she becomes heroic, she also becomes content again. So where then is the moral center? The show offers none. Instead, it asks you to sit in discomfort. Not to root for Joan or hate Streamberry, but to feel the weight of a reality where ethics are increasingly decoupled from responsibility. Where every act of observation is also an act of participation. Where even morality has become a subscription tier. The scariest part of Joan Is Awful isn't the quantum computer. It's that nothing in the episode actually feels like science fiction. The technology already exists. The contracts already exist. The cultural incentives already exist. What the episode presents isn't a warning, it's a mirror, held up to a reality we've quietly normalized. Let's start with the elephant in the room, AI-generated entertainment. The concept of a machine that can scan your data and auto-produce personalized content isn't just possible, it's being prototyped. Tools like OpenAI's Sora, Google's Lumiere, and generative storytelling engines are already experimenting with real-time video synthesis, voice cloning, and dynamic narrative branching. Hollywood isn't racing to avoid this future, it's racing to own it. During the 2023 SAG-AFTRA strike, Joan Is Awful was referenced multiple times as the cultural touchstone of the moment. Actors were demanding protection against their digital likenesses being reused, remixed, or resurrected. The episode gave their fears a face. It also revealed how little legal infrastructure actually exists to protect human identity in an age of synthetic performance. And the issue isn't limited to celebrities. Everyday people, TikTok creators, OnlyFans workers, live streamers, are seeing their voices, faces, and personalities used without consent in deepfake porn, fake ads, and manipulated political videos. Your identity is now a file. Your behavior is a dataset. Your consent retroactively implied. What Joan Is Awful dramatizes is already happening in fragments. The only thing missing is a corporation brazen enough to do it at scale, and the only thing stopping that is public tolerance. Then there's the platform layer. Streamberry is Netflix in everything but name. Its UX, sound design, thumbnails, all mirror the very interface we, the audience, are using to watch this critique. It's not parody. It's self-portrait. And that's part of the meta trap. The very platforms that warn us about surveillance capitalism are also the ones collecting our data to train their algorithms. The critique is monetized. The mirror has ads on it. This is where the simulation becomes recursive. We're not just watching Joan get turned into content, we're watching ourselves watch her, knowing we've given up the same permissions, clicked the same boxes, allowed the same monitoring. And yet, instead of acting, we binge another episode. That paralysis, the disconnect between awareness and action, is the true horror. Can it be fixed? Maybe, but not through tech alone. The episode quietly suggests that systemic change won't come from individual rebellion. Joan doesn't win because she's clever. She wins because she's desperate. But desperation can't scale. What's needed is structural intervention, updated privacy laws, clear biometric ownership rights, real enforcement against exploitative licensing. Europe's AI Act is a start. California's privacy framework helps. But enforcement is weak, and global consensus remains distant. More interestingly, the episode implies a deeper kind of solution, one rooted in cultural resistance. Joan only begins to fight back when she stops being polite, when she stops optimizing her image, when she breaks the fourth wall of her own life. That's the real prescription here: refuse to perform. If your life is being watched, recorded, simulated, and rated, then every small act of refusal, logging out, breaking script, not playing the part, becomes a political gesture. Not enough to dismantle the machine, but enough to short-circuit it for a moment. And maybe that's where hope lives. Not in escaping the system, but in jamming it just long enough to remember that you were never meant to be content. You were meant to be human. Joan Is Awful didn't just start a conversation. It became content about content. Within days of its release, social media was flooded with Streamberry-themed filters. Instagram stories invited users to generate your own awful show title. TikTok creators role-played as fake celebrities discovering their deepfake avatars. Twitter, now X. Threads unpacked the episode with screenshots of real-life terms of service that were even more invasive than the fictional ones. The show had warned us, and we turned it into a trend. This cultural loop, where critique becomes consumption, mirrors what happened with Don't Look Up, The Social Dilemma, and even Fight Club. The system devours dissent, then repackages it as product. But it also proves how deeply the story resonated. Joan Is Awful gave language to a fear many didn't know how to articulate, the suspicion that their lives were no longer private and no longer theirs. Academically, the episode has already been cited in digital media ethics courses, privacy law conferences, and AI ethics panels. Some scholars have proposed new frameworks for consent resilience, the idea that consent should degrade over time and require renewal, especially in AI-based entertainment. Others have used the episode to illustrate Baudrillard's hyperreality or Zuboff's surveillance capitalism in classroom settings. In short, Joan Is Awful became both case study and cautionary tale. For viewers interested in digging deeper, here are a few lesser-known but thematically aligned works worth watching. Cam, 2018, directed by Daniel Goldhaber. A psychological thriller about a cam girl whose identity is stolen by a deep fake version of herself. Explores the fragmentation of digital identity and the horror of being replaced by your own image. Perfect Blue, 1997, by Satoshi Kon. An anime masterpiece that prefigures digital identity collapse. A pop idol quits fame, only to be stalked by a digital version of herself. Surreal, disturbing, and shockingly prophetic. The Congress, 2013, directed by Ari Folman. A hybrid of live-action and animation, it follows an aging actress, Robin Wright playing herself, who sells the rights to her digital likeness. The film is a haunting meditation on immortality, control, and the erosion of self. The Final Cut, 2004, starring Robin Williams. In a world where people have memory implants that can be edited after death, a cutter assembles highlight reels for funerals. Raises haunting questions about selective memory, digital legacy, and posthumous image control. And for readers, Reality Plus by David J. Chalmers. A philosophical inquiry into simulation theory and virtual consciousness, arguing that virtual lives might be just as real and morally important as physical ones. You Are Not a Gadget by Jaron Lanier. A plea against the reduction of human identity into algorithms. Lanier, an early internet pioneer, explores how digital culture flattens nuance and erodes selfhood. Deepfakes, The Coming Infocalypse by Nina Schick. A short but urgent book explaining the rise of AI-generated misinformation, its dangers to democracy, and how we might build resilience. Taken together, these works sketch the full terrain that Joan Is Awful stands upon: the collapse of digital privacy, the commodification of identity, and increasing blurriness between simulation and truth. They remind us that while the tools may be new, the struggle is ancient. Who controls the narrative of your life? The answer, increasingly, is not you, unless you start writing again. As Joan says, staring down the system that devoured her. This isn't my story. It's their story about me. But now that the show is over, we have to ask, is that still true? Because if Joan Is Awful taught us anything, it's that the greatest violence in the digital age isn't surveillance, it's narrative theft. To be watched is passive. To be rewritten without consent is annihilation. You remain visible, but only as a construct, a version of yourself that serves others. This is where the concept of the banality of evil emerges with full force. Coined by political philosopher Hannah Arendt during her coverage of Adolf Eichmann's trial in 1961, the phrase describes a chilling phenomenon: great harm inflicted not by monsters, but by ordinary people doing their jobs, following orders, or simply not thinking. Evil, in her view, is not always committed by fanatics. It is often committed by the detached, the efficient, the uncritical. It is evil without intent, action without thought. And what is the world of Joan Is Awful, if not a perfect stage for banal evil? Look at Bep, the engineer played with bone-dry calm by Michael Cera. He is not malicious. He's just operating, feeding simulations, managing systems. When Joan begs for help, his response is blank: "That's not my department." That line echoes across industries, across platforms, across real-world bureaucracies where harm is automated and accountability is evaporated. He is Eichmann in a hoodie, not ideologically motivated, but operationally complicit. In this world, suffering is not a glitch. It is a feature. And the people who maintain that system, coders, executives, lawyers, viewers, can continue doing so precisely because they don't feel like villains. Their distance shields them. Their job titles absolve them. Their well-lit workspaces sterilize the consequences of their work. This is what makes Streamberry so terrifying, not its scale but its normalcy. Everyone is just doing their part. Everyone is just agreeing, clicking, watching, recommending. And in that flow, evil becomes ambient, unremarkable, profitable. It's not a dystopia of control. It's a democracy of apathy. And so Joan's final rebellion, her smashing of the quantum computer, lands with tragic irony. Because even that act, visceral, defiant, cathartic, is pre-scripted, filmed, framed, monetized. She is not escaping the system. She is feeding it. The real escape, the episode suggests, is far less cinematic. It lies in refusal. Refusing to perform. Refusing to agree. Refusing to outsource thought. But this isn't easy because the system doesn't require your belief, only your compliance. So what does it mean to resist in an age of automated evil? It means noticing. It means asking questions where the system has trained you to scroll past. It means reclaiming authorship where the algorithm would rather write for you. And perhaps most importantly, it means recognizing that passivity is not neutrality, it is power redirected. Because in a world where evil is engineered to feel frictionless, awareness itself becomes a revolutionary act. So we leave you with this final provocation. If you found out tomorrow that your life was being streamed on Streamberry, who would you be in their version of you? And who are you without their script? Tell us in the comments. Refuse to comment. Refuse to be reviewed. Refuse to be content. Choose silence. Choose authorship.